Hello and welcome everybody. It's Matt from Pure MTG here. I've got some exciting news. This is fresh off the press. I just wrote this document probably a few days ago, and we've been working on it a few days since. It's not completely done, but it's in a very good spot to start playtesting, and I think that this is so fun and I want more involvement with the community that I wanted to just kind of send it out there. I'm going to be continually updating this document, and this will be available for everybody to view in the link in the description below. And so, this is Commander Raids Gauntlet Mode. Name subject to change, of course. Basically, it's Commander Raids with a roguelike aspect to it, with kind of a little bit of Mortal Kombat mixed in. If you played Mortal Kombat back in the day, you fought monsters and you kind of climbed this like tower in Mortal Kombat. And every time you killed a monster, your character like moved up the side of the tower, and you kind of like went up the list of monsters or enemies, I should say. In Commander Raids, it's typically in our standard format, our baseline format is what we call it internally. It's just you have 3 different difficulties. You pick a difficulty, and then they have different charts based on those difficulties, and then you just kind of go with it. And then it's just one fight, and then if you win, you win, and that's it. That's fun, and my ADD brain wants more. I constantly want to. I'm not saying that I feel bored, but it's like I want to do more. It just feels like the game sometimes in Commander Raids it just ends abruptly, and I'm just like, but I want to continue on. I guess kind of. It's weird because like I want like more. I guess more. Maybe it's more complexity, whatever it is. But Commander Raids Gauntlet Mode gives that. So basically, what it is it's like I said, the roguelike system where you fight a series of raid monsters, and they're going to be themed around certain bosses or generals in Magic the Gathering lore. Our first one is Sheoldred, and she's got 2 lieutenants in here, Rona, Sheoldred's Faithful, and Erte, Resurrected. Both of those are in Magic lore. They are actually both her lieutenants. In the big fight against the Phyrexians or whatnot. So, the biggest thing that changes with these is there's Boons and Blights. Just like in a roguelike, if you're familiar with like Slay the Spire, every time you complete a stage, you're able to pick like two or between 3 different cards. And those cards are either something you add to your deck, or maybe you get like an artifact that like kind of modifies the way you play. In this, boons are a new mechanic that's being introduced, and it manipulates your playthrough. Actually, real quick before I go into what boons are, if you're not familiar with the Commander Raids format is, there's a document inside this document. I would highly recommend reading that. It's a player versus player or player versus environment format. So it could be one player versus the environment versus the monster, or it could be multiple players versus the monster. And it's designed to be a cooperative, really fun game to play with your friends. Still using Commander decks and still using most of the Commander rules. There's a few or a few outlier rules that we've kind of adjusted or changed for the format, but mostly, like I would say, like 98% of the rules of Commander apply to Commander Raids and Commander Raids Gauntlet. So I would highly recommend checking out that document there. If you'd like to join our Discord, I'd highly recommend clicking on this link inside this document. This will join you into the Discord, and this way you can provide feedback, ask questions, come play games with us. I know that Bob, my other partner on the channel, he's constantly asking if people are interested in playing games. We would like to play more games. Obviously, the larger the format grows, the easier that will be. Not many people know about us, but we do have almost 100 people in the Discord. So as more and more people are added, it should be easier and easier to find games to play. And I actually do think that this is an evolution of Commander Raids in my mind. This is something that only I've done as far as like the people on the channel. Like just Bob has very little involvement in this because I think he's pretty happy with the Commander Raids. He loves he just has fun with it. He loves it. He loves the there's enough complexity to make him happy. And I don't know that he's really played Gauntlet Mode yet. Maybe once he plays it, he likes complex games. So maybe once he'll play it, he'll like it. But at the moment, it's just myself that has done work into this, except for one other person. TEF, Mr. Toast. I always call him just Mr. Toast because I don't know what TEF means. Mr. Toast is, we'll get to this, but he's a massive a driver for this format. Okay, So now that we got all of that out of the way, so there's two things being added into this format that aren't in the Commander Raids format. Boons. Boons are a new mechanic that are being introduced that manipulate your playthrough and make it different each time. Standard roguelike situation. There's a number of generic boons as well as tower-specific boons that will form the boon deck. Basically, you've got 45 boon cards that are in a variety of different rarities, and they're broken down into commons being the most common, uncommon, rare. So you standard, tier of rarities. And they're there for boons, and when you first start your first game, you're able to select from your common and uncommon boons. You shuffle those boons together, take all the other boons out, shuffle that deck together, and then you flip over 3 cards and you pick a boon. Well, what are our boons? Boons are kind of like emblems where they're constantly in effect. So, for instance, an example boon would be at the beginning of combat, beginning of your combat, I should say. Beginning of your combat, choose a creature you control. I guess that takes care of it. It gains first strike until the end of combat. These aren't designed to be extremely busted at common level, but they're going to be very useful, and they can alter how you play. There's a large variety of different effects. It's not just at the beginning of combat X happens. There's scries, there's surveils, there's draw ditch. There's all kinds of varieties. We'll get to those momentarily. But the boons definitely enhance the gameplay, and I actually think it's pretty fun. Just being able to start the game with just a little, just a common or a common boon. Just being able to even surveil one at the beginning of your upkeep can allow you to keep a hand that's a little risky, but being able to surveil one at the beginning of every upkeep is pretty strong, especially on the right decks, of course. And the object is to have fun, and the object is to kind of break the game. I'm sure there are situations to where that I haven't really thought about, and maybe a boon breaks a deck, and I'm okay with this. The format is with boons, kind of like in a if you've ever played Slay the Spire, you can build broken things and you will blow through the gauntlet no problem. And I'm okay with this. If something becomes too egregious, then it's fine. We can take those out or change them a little bit. Like the first iteration was you got to keep your commander out in between gauntlets. If your commander was out when you killed the lieutenant, you got to keep it for the next fight, and they just stay on the battlefield. So you just start with your commander. I very quickly realized that is way too strong. A wide variety of things, but Animar, for instance, he keeps his counters because he just stays in the battlefield. Why wouldn't he keep his counters? He hasn't left. And then everything in your hand is nothing, because most likely the previous game you've gotten at least a couple counters on him. And then he's also super strong, and because he's on your upkeep, because he's on your battlefield on your upkeep, he'll have no summoning sickness. So if he's strong enough, he can literally just come in and one-tap the boss. So obviously that's not good. So I've changed it since then, also testing this to see if this is, you learn things in playtesting. It sounds cool, because we want some kind of I guess me and Toast. We want some kind of thing that kind of stays through the entire format. Like for instance, when you're playing Slay the Spire, your deck stays the same, but you do manipulate, add cards to it. Your artifacts are changing, but they're staying with you. And I thought, for me, your commander staying with you per run. If he's out when you kill the lieutenant, stays there. Either way, I've changed it to you exile your commander, and then you bring it back at the beginning of the end step, the beginning of the end step of the first turn. So it won't have haste on the first turn unless you already, of course, have haste. But either way, it'll be at the end of the end steps or beginning of the end step. So it should avoid a lot of that problem where it just comes in one shots. It won't retain any counters. It won't remember anything. So being exiled and coming back is a way to make it really strong. That might still be too strong. It might be difficult to adjust based on how powerful some commanders can be by being on the battlefield. Being at the beginning of the end step, it does prevent beginning of the end step effects happening. So, for instance, Urza, Artificer, the one that creates the constructs, that won't create the construct because the beginning of the end step has already happened. So, it's still powerful, but it may not be overwhelmingly powerful. We'll see. If it becomes a problem, then what I'll probably end up doing is making it a boon where your commander comes in if you got the boon, and maybe it's an uncommon or something like that. Obviously, it's very strong. But, again, this is a community. I want this to be a community thing because I think that this is really, really I think I'm onto something. But me and Toast, I wanted to do this from the get go, and Toast was kind of the driving force. I said the thing on stream, and he just was like, I've created some gauntlet bosses. Let's do it. And the rules that he created was very very basic, and we just kind of started playing the game, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is fun. Okay, so it kind of just spiked the, I don't know, the dopamine, which is kind of what I needed with my ADD brain. I need that dopamine spike of something new, something changed, something different that is fun. I do think this is it. Along with Boons, we're adding something called Blights. Blights are a new mechanic being introduced that will be given to you from the raid monsters in the Gauntlet via their roll table. So just like in our commander raids, each boss will have its own table, and we'll get to that momentarily. But one of them is to get a blight from the boss. So blights are they either place something on the player's battlefield or manipulate cards from their deck, sometimes both. So each lieutenant and general will have its own blight token. When a blight effect is rolled on the raid monster table, each player reveals a top card of their library, blights that card by slipping in the blight token. They're actually, I'll get to it, but I'm very excited. There's actual full-on tokens, full cards to be printed out. They all have art and everything. It's amazing. I think this is actually a pretty sick product. I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, product, we'll call it. All right, so you take the card, you take the blight token, you slip the blight token on top of the card in the sleeve, then you shuffle that into your library. When the blighted card is drawn, or if it's put into your hand, immediately resolve the blighted card ability. While a card is blighted on the battlefield, you may look at it at any time. The blighted card will have an effect while on the battlefield, as well as an activated ability to cleanse the blight. When you pay the activated cost to cleanse the blight, remove the blight token card from the sleeve, and you may immediately play the cleansed card without paying its mana cost. A card remains blighted no matter what zone it goes to until the card is cleansed, including further lieutenants in the gauntlet. So, if it is a permanent, these blighted cards, because it is a physical card, so it's a permanent. I don't have anything tied to it yet as far as if it's an enchantment, an artifact. Maybe that changes from boss to boss, but that'll be more testing required. I think at first they were artifacts, but we'll see. So, for instance, if you sacrifice a permanent to cast a spell, that blighted card will go to your graveyard, but it still remains the blighted card. You don't necessarily have the effect anymore, but if the next game that you start, when you draw that card, it's going to be a blighted card and it goes on the field. Not only is it an annoying thing to have as far as it has an effect that happens, depends on what the raid monster is, but it's also covering the card. So it could be a land, it could be a really powerful spell. The cool thing is that you do have the ability to cleanse the blight and then play that spell for free. So the blighted cards, they probably need to be more powerful than they actually currently are right now. I don't actually think they do. I don't think they're impactful enough. They probably should be more difficult, considering that you can pay, it's only 3 mana to cleanse the blight and then cast whatever that card is for free. But, that's why we play test. So anyways, I'll get into, okay, so example blighted card. Put this token onto the battlefield under control. Remember, the moment you see a blighted card, including your opening hand, it immediately goes onto the battlefield. And that can mess up your opening hand if you have too many blights in your deck. Currently, it's limited to 10 blights, but again, playtesting. So that blighted card, goes directly onto the battlefield. This one here in particular says at the beginning of your upkeep, this token deals 1 damage to you and each creature you control. So that's fairly strong. Takes care of all the mana dorks, takes care of all the really powerful, Mother of Runes and stuff like that. So this one in particular is really strong. That's the example one that I'm actually not using, but that's one that I came up as an example. So as previously mentioned, a massive shout out to one of our community members. He's in our Discord, TEF Mr. Toast. He's been a major driver for this format, as I mentioned previously before. He took our concept idea and made his own version, which after playing with him gave me a lot of drive to put this together. And below is our first play test gauntlet, in which he has done a lot of the work on selecting which general and lieutenants would be in it. He came up with the idea of it being Sheoldred and Rona. I did some researching on the lore to see who else was under Sheoldred. I had to imagine there's plenty of people to choose from, which is pretty cool because that means there could be an infinite number of towers. There's so many good and bad generals and lieutenants below them. So it'll be pretty cool just to be able to make all kinds of flavored different gauntlets that you can kind of go through. And hell, if you want to run through like multiples, you can go lieutenant, boss, lieutenant, boss, and you can just keep going and stacking the boons, and it'll just be crazy. I'm sure it'll be nuts, and that's cool. He did a lot of the work with selecting the 2 generals, and then he also had their static abilities and some of their table results. Speaking of which, in Gauntlet Edition, the raid monsters have static abilities. In our standard format, they don't actually have any standard abilities. They're just kind of, just generic, like we said, baseline raid monsters. And we've always said in the past that we wanted to make a more in-depth version, like I said, a Gauntlet Mode or whatever. And I think that just kind of takes it to the next level. I actually do think that maybe a static ability on even the baseline monsters is a good idea. Something I'll have to talk to Bob about to see what he thinks, and of course Pat. So with these static abilities, they also have their own table, which is tailored specifically to each raid monster. If you're familiar with our standard rule set, these will look familiar to you. However, you'll notice a key difference. There are Blights, obviously, and there are also fewer abilities that are on the tables because they're more specialized. I still wanted to keep it a D20, but I wanted to make them more specialized in their role. So we'll take a look at our first Gauntlet Lieutenant here for Children. And this is designed to be ran as Lieutenant Boss. And your boons are based on that. Basically, every time you kill a Lieutenant, you're going to have your standard 45 Blights, 45 boons. And then every time you kill a Lieutenant, you add 5 boons to the table, shuffle, or to the deck, and then you'll shuffle the deck, and then you'll draw your boons for defeating the Lieutenant. Like I said, you get to draw 3, pick 1, shuffle the rest back in, and then it kind of go around in turn order on who picks the boons. Or how do you draw your boons, rather. So Rona Shielders Faithful, 20 hit points per player. You use the Rona Blight tokens during this fight. Max 10 Blights per deck. That's, of course, everything in this document is subject to change, so just remember that. So she has a static ability. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, each player, except for Rona, loses 2 life. If you're starting off at 40 life, that means collectively you can only play 20 spells. 20 instants or sorceries, unless you have some life gain or whatever. You'll notice also in the chart, I'm not going to go over every result, but you'll notice in the chart there's other ways that you lose life. There's a very large chance that you're not going to lose to the lieutenants. It's kind of designed to be, they're fairly easy at the moment. None of these that you're going to lose to. I haven't lost a single time to Rona. I've almost lost to Erte, and Shouldered I've lost to a couple times. So it's kind of designed to kind of, you just kind of, it's manipulating the deck. Like when you play a roguelike, you don't just get stomped the first time. Like these aren't designed to be super hard, but what they do is they blight those cards from your deck. And for instance, these here, you'll notice in a lot of our things, we do these defender things, these defender tokens of some sort. They're mainly there as roadblocks or just defenders for their lieutenant. But in this specific instance, they actually have ways to manipulate your deck as well. They're 1/1 Fire Action Zombies with Infect and Defender. For you get 1 per each opponent. DR equals dice, number of dice rolled. So if you're rolling 3 dice this round, then it'll be 1, 3, 3 per player. That's for instance. And that'll be an Infect, Defender. And they also have, when this creature leaves the battlefield, the player that removes this creature blights the top card of the library. So if it's via combat, if you exile it with an effect or with a Swords to Plowshare or whatever, however the token gets removed, whoever did it, they're the ones that get blighted. And remember that you take the blight token, you slip it in front of the card, shuffle it back in. There's some board destructions, there's some blighting here, which realistically, instead of saying 2, this should be the number 2 and bolded. I'm doing this thing where I'm trying out to like bold and highlight or underline or quotations, things in the chart. Sometimes reading the chart, it could be, I don't know, maybe difficult to parse if you're not like, I don't know, reading. I just try to make it easier to read, I guess. We'll see how. If you guys, let me know if you like this version of the chart better versus the Commander Raids original document, which is just kind of like the results, just all without any highlights or anything. All right, another unique ability that these raid Gauntlet Mode monsters will have is that whenever you roll 20, you roll on the boss's chart. And I think that's really cool because not only do they have their static abilities, but the Sheoldred has her own static ability as well. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. But because she's a boss, she has 2 static abilities, and the other static ability is No Mercy. Whenever a creature deals damage to you, destroy it. That's any kind of damage, non-combat damage, any damage. Whenever you do damage, it's gone. So things like Omnath actually ends up killing himself if you play more than, I think it's more than 1 land. So yeah, that sucks. But it's a boss. It's designed to be hard. This is probably your failure point for most games. So it's pretty cool that you'll have, when you're fighting Rona, you could almost picture Sheoldred coming in and assisting her lieutenant for that round. And the cool thing as well is that for this role, her active ability, or I'm sorry, her static ability is active. And she also adds 5 life to her maximum hit point pool when you fight her. So normally she's getting 30 hit points per player. It'll be 30 hit points per player plus 5 for every time this is rolled, every time a 20 is rolled. It only triggers once each turn. That's the life gain is only triggering once each turn. You'll still always roll on the chart, but you only add 5 life per time it's rolled per turn. So if you roll a 20 twice, you'll only add 5 life, but you'll still roll on Sheoldred's board twice. If that makes sense. The next one is Erte Resurrected. And also you'll notice, actually just real quick, you'll notice that the static abilities are actually what's on the card. Like Rona Sheoldred's Faithful is an actual magic card, and this static ability that's her ability. The only thing that's changed is this is just 1 life instead of 2 life. 1 life on the card, 2 life here. It needs to be a little bit more impactful when there's multiple players, and it is the commander, I guess you'd call it. All right, so Erte Resurrected, 25 hit points per player, escalating in difficulty. There isn't going to be any difficulties in this. It's just going to be basically how many you decide to take on. There is a way to change difficulty. Say, for instance, with the boons, you could add in all the boons together and just say, you know what, I'll allow rares and mythics to be added in right off the rip, so you have a chance of getting a rare or mythic before you fight anything. I'm okay with that. That's just make sure you agree as a group. Kind of same thing as session or rule 0 of Commander. If your group is fine with that, do it. I'm going to stick with the common uncommon on the first lieutenant. And then once the first lieutenant is added, then you take the rares and the mythics plus the 5 cards from the whatever lieutenant you kill, shuffle those all together, then you draw your boons. So you still have a chance of getting a mythic or a rare boon, after you kill the first lieutenant. But I think that starting off with a rare or a mythic is probably too strong. We'll get to the boons; they're very strong, so you'll see why. Like I said, it's designed to be fun. But Erte Resurrected is kind of he's a thing. He's got his own blight tokens that we'll go look at later. But his static ability: counter the first creature spell, triggered ability, or activated ability each turn unless you sacrifice a creature, discard a card, or lose 5 life. So he's going to tax your hand, your creature pool, or your life pool on every first creature spell, triggered ability, or activated ability. That's fetch lands. So your fetch land could cost you 6 life, or your fetch land could cost you a play, fetch, a life plus a discard, or a life plus a creature. So, there are ways you could take advantage of that. Maybe you need a sacrifice outlet for a creature. You could pay a fetch land, pay for the fetch land for the 1 life, and then sacrifice the creature for his static ability. And it is only the first thing that happens. You have to remember that any triggered ability that includes permanents, except for I'm excluding boons from this. I kind of want boons to be like, I think it might be too difficult to maintain the balance of boons if they were like affected by stuff on the battlefield. They're just off on their own thing. They're technically on a battlefield like an emblem, but just treat them like they don't exist for most card effects, if that makes sense. Okay, so he also creates his own version of the defenders. These are completed goblins with first strike and defender, and then when they die, they blow up. Also, this will be reworded to match the wording of the first one. When this creature leaves the battlefield, that'll be the same. So whenever these goblins leave the battlefield, each player will take 2 damage. This does include Erte, because that's fun. Goblins, they don't care. They're going to blow up and go boom, and Erte's going to get hurt. That's fine. But all players take that damage. You got some board destruction, some targeted destruction for either creatures or planeswalkers. This isn't a wipe fest like some raid monsters can feel. Sometimes the Commander Raids format can feel a little wipey, and we've been trying to make the baseline not feel that much or feel that way. And that's the kind of cool thing about this format is that if you didn't like that about that, there are some board wipes, but it's not as many. And because they're weaker power level overall, you'll find that you're like beating, plus like of course you get the boons, but you'll find you're beating more raid monsters, and I guess it just feels good. It's like a sense of progression almost, and yeah, it's pretty cool. This will be Blights too. At the moment, I actually was worried. The reason why this was max Blights 10 per deck, I actually thought that there would be too many Blights happening, but in playtesting, it actually is like almost never happening. Like even though there's like 5 chances here, there's like 1 here or 2 here. I just like people would end the game with like maybe 1 to 2 Blights, and I was kind of expecting there to be like 10 probably per lieutenant. So that's going to be worked in. There's going to be more blighting happening. Yeah, so it should be fun. Same thing here. Out of 20, of course, you go roll off the general's board. All right, so then you have the boss. Boss here starts off with 30 hit points per player, and then you use the Shouldered Blight token, max 10 blights per deck. Static ability, whenever opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. And No Mercy, whenever a creature deals combat damage to or deals damage to you, destroy it. This is literally the No Mercy card, so the actual card that exists. So you'll notice that Shoulder the Apocalypse does a lot of cool things. Each player draws a card, discards a card. Each player draws a card. Each player... So initially, in my head, and this is why playtesting, and this is why I don't normally release documents this early, but like I said, I think it's really... I want people to be involved. But yeah, so I want the Shouldered fight to play like you're playing against a group. They call it, what is it, group slug? I think it's a group slug Shouldered, where like there's like Howling Mines and you're constantly drawing cards and losing life. And it also does punish those decks that like the AC decks where they're like playing like 3-4 lands a turn, drawing 4 cards a turn, taking 8 life to turn. And that's pretty, you're gonna die pretty quick. And actually, we ran into that issue yesterday. Well, a buddy and I were playing, and yeah, he was trying so hard, and he even had a really good boon that gave his commander lifelink, and it's still he could just not, just too many card draws. But anyways, yeah. So you'll notice this will be like a very group sluggy thing where Shield's gonna let you draw a bunch of cards. Her blights are probably gonna let you draw cards. So it should be really cool. Her blight's probably gonna be different than it is now. Right now, I had a blight in mind. I think it was something like you got the divination for free. And then, like, maybe the blighted card gets cleansed right away instead of it being, like, something that's on the battlefield. Or maybe it's just a Howling Mine every turn. I don't know. That'll be really cool. Let me know in the description what you guys think. But maybe, like, every time you get a blighted card on the battlefield, it's just a Howling Mine. And, like, it sounds great. I get to draw a bunch of cards. But if you've ever played against Shoulder the Apocalypse, you'll understand it gets painful really quick. Especially if your deck also is designed to draw cards. So... and then also having the No Mercy tacked onto that, like you have to do big swings and do a lot of damage. She doesn't really have a way to gain life, which is maybe a potential fail. There's a couple lose life for opponents, but I probably should add in some life gain because Shoulder definitely gains life when stuff happens. So I'll probably maybe she'll gain life every time you draw a card, something like that. She's already pretty strong, but like I said, with the boons, it gets pretty wild. All right, okay, so this is the breakdown of the boons. So the boon deck consists of the below number of boons per gauntlet. You'll start off with the basic boon deck, and after each lieutenant is defeated, shuffle their boons into the boon deck before the boons are rewarded. So the basic boon deck is 45 cards. There's 24 commons, 12 uncommons, 6 rares, 3 mythics, 45 total. And then, of course, you're going to have, every time you defeat a lieutenant or general. See, the interesting thing about a general is I want... You have the ability to go, like I said, lieutenant, general, and you could do more past that. But at the moment, you're only going to get... I mean, obviously, the fight's over. With the gauntlet's over if you kill the general, so the boons that you get rewarded from the general mean nothing. And I thought there would be kind of a cool system to where you could, like I said, you can keep going after that. So she will still reward a set of boons, but that only matters if you're going to continue going with 2 more lieutenants and then another boss or some other, if you make another gauntlet yourself of like 2 generals or 2 lieutenants and a general or whatnot. But yeah, another idea would be anytime you kill a general, maybe you got like a currency of some sort, and you can spend that currency at a randomly generated shop, like kind of artifact type deals where, you know, you can kind of create an even more extensive experience. That is something that I have in my head. It's very, very Slay the Spire. But I think it's really cool. Slay the Spire with a commander deck just sounds awesome to me. And so far in play, it is pretty awesome. All right, so here are a list of the boons. This is in the document. Like I said, it's going to be in the description below. I'm not going to go through and read all of them, but I'll just highlight a couple of them. The first 7 here are at the beginning of combat. Something happens. First strike, lifelink, flying. You get trample, haste, 3/3, or menace. Those are all there. This one at the beginning of upkeep, you gain a life. Not that powerful, but it is a free life gain. This could probably be pumped to 2. Like I said, as I play test it, I'll know how it feels based on like which ones I'm picking. If I'm gravitated to picking some more often, and I'm just like kind of whatever about those other ones, I'll know I need to buff those to make them more appealing. So like this Font of Healing, for instance, not really that powerful, but it is common. So you know, it is up to you. You get to choose from 3, so there's a very large chance you'll have plenty. You get to reduce your mana cost from your commander, from your colorless. Get an Anthem. Pay 2 life, draw a card whenever a creature enters the battlefield on your control. You make a 1/1 at the end of every turn. You know, increase hand size by 2. Surveil 1. Beginning of your end step, create a token. Create a clue at the end of your end step. This one here is really, really strong. Probably too strong for a common, but like I said, I don't mind power level being too powerful, but it's basically a dig through time. You can flip over the boon and exile 7 cards from your graveyard. If you do, you flip over the boon. I think it's a little bit stronger or weaker than Dig Through Time because you can't pay mana for it. You have to have 7 cards. But for decks that can do that very easily, it's a very strong boon. Uncommon ones here has some more at the beginning of combat. Get something. Double Strike, Undying, which is really cool. And then Indestructible, also very solid. Don't do that. Draw Ditch, which is obviously pretty strong. Playing additional land every turn, very, very strong. Being able to pay colorless mana to fight something, pretty strong. No maximum hand size, also pretty strong. Chromatic Nexus, make your lands that tap for mana, so your fetch lands don't tap for extra, but you know, your actual normal lands do. They add for 1 mana of any color, and then you can just start straight up with a command tower on the battlefield, basically. Pretty strong. Rares, obviously going to be even stronger. If you would draw a card, instead draw 2 cards, gain 2 life. That's very, very strong. Just have a global emblem always out, any game you play. Maybe not necessarily as strong for when you're playing against Sheoldred, but you are gaining 2 life, so you're negating half of the damage. So that's pretty strong. Gain 1 life for each card in your hand. Very strong. It really negates a lot of Sheoldred's effects. And that's the thing, like a lot of these are generically good, but also fairly strong against Sheoldred with the life gain for the first 2. Being able to activate a Planeswalker an additional time each turn, pretty strong. Reduce your mana cost of your commander by 3, pretty strong. Cast instant sorceries from your graveyard whenever you want. They exile when you cast them, so basically flashback for everything in your graveyard, instants and sorceries, pretty darn strong. And then of course Mythics are designed to be even more strong. I think the Apex Commanders is maybe a little bit too weak for Mythic, but commanders you control have Hexproof and Indestructible. So it is strong, Hexproof, Indestructible, and Lifelink, but maybe not necessarily Mythic. Maybe it needs one more tagline, or maybe some plussings of like maybe +2/+2 or flying, or I don't know, something. But yeah, I do think that that one's maybe not Mythic compared to the other 2. Where the first spell you cast each turn costs no colorless mana. That includes your commander. So that completely negates commander tax, which is pretty insane. And then also the other one is untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. So you get a Seedborn Muse that can never be removed. It can never die. It's just always there. Very, very strong. All right, so here's the blighted tokens. Here's the extra, the juice that the things that are your lieutenants are trying to blight you with. So card text, immediately upon being drawn or put into your hand, put this token into play under your control. At the beginning of your upkeep, lose 1 life for each Blight token in play. So they're going to be somewhat synergistic as far as like working off of each other. So this one cares about every Blight token in play. The other one's going to be at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature if you don't lose 3 life. This one's not quite as synergistic, you know. And I think that the shouldered one... Oh, no, it is. Okay, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Yeah, maybe this should be lose 4 life. Either way, like I said, this is gonna be changed some. Oh, you're also losing life based on... Never mind, you're losing also 2 life. You're losing 6 life and drawing 2 cards. So yeah, that's probably fine. Because she has her static ability as well. So yeah, these are basically like a divination that you have to cleanse to get rid of. You'll notice that the activated ability, you have to pay 3 colorless mana to cleanse the blighted card. You may immediately remove the blight and play the card without paying its mana cost. So if it's a land, you can play the land as long as you haven't played a land this turn, or if you have extra land drops, you're good. If you've already played your land this turn, and it is a land, then don't do that. You'll probably want to pay the 3 mana and then cleanse it. I kind of want there to be more, not stacking effects, but stacking effects where like when there's like blight tokens out, the more that are on the battlefield, the worse it gets. Kind of like this compounding difficulty. Rona's does that well, but it's probably too weak. And then Erte's maybe not as strong. You only lose 3 life a turn. It's not that big a deal. I guess you have to do it the way it's worded. So maybe it is pretty good. It is pretty strong. So it only says if you don't, if you like, you can't. Maybe it should say if you can't, you lose 3 life. Either way, this isn't a may. You have to do it. Anyways. Yeah. So there are flavor texts involved as well. Faithful servants of Shoulder knew the price of their devotion, yet they willingly accepted the burden of corruption. Each blight token marks another sacrifice made in her name. This I might have to remove from the actual tokens themselves because if you can imagine, this is a lot of words to put on a card, and it makes the text you can see it makes the text quite small. And if people don't have very, very good eyes, then, well, I mean, even with me, I have very good vision, and I can read it, but I can understand if people, it's like font size 10 on, well, actually, no, probably even smaller than that. It's like font size, like, maybe 6 or 5. Anyways. So, now we get into the juicy part as far as, like, the aesthetics. I'm super stoked about how these came out. I made token and art for all of them. And I say made art. I had AI generate me art for all of them. It's not as easy as you think because you have to have the right descriptor words and the right you get a lot of art that isn't like, it doesn't make sense, or if it's like the hands are all like jacked up because like the AI can't draw hands at all. It's so difficult for the AI to draw like good looking hands. So these are what I ended up coming up with, and then the card frame was from, it was called cardconjurer.com or .net.com. And these are frames on their website, and they're under the creative license, so it can be used for whatever you want. But yeah, these, I'll flip one of them over. How do I get to? I literally just did this. Sorry, hold. Help. I just did this. Maybe I won't flip one over. I literally just did this. This is one of the downs. I'm not editing this out. I'm sorry. Just hold for a second. There it is. Anyways, we'll flip one of these over so you guys can see. The reason why they're like that is because they need to be 4x4, or I guess it'd be 2x4, in order to fit 8 cards on the page. Otherwise, it's like 6. And I'm trying to not have as much paper. I'm trying to utilize as much paper as possible, because if you're gonna have to print these out, you know. I'll flip over this one as well because it's that one actually is on the screen. All right, so this is actually, like I said, AI generated art, and kind of like rotate out. Yeah, AI generated art, and then I just used the template to fill out the rest of the text, and I guess I'll just zoom in on. There we go. yeah, really, really cool looking borders, and yeah, they all have their names of what each ability is. I try to think of names for each one based on the actual effect of what it's doing. You'll notice down here there's actually like it says basic boon deck and how many are of whatever the number is out of the 45. So it's kind of like a set to collect, I guess, but you'll have all the cards to print them out. So, and at one point I'll be able to print them out at Make Playing Cards, and I'll try to use the thinnest cardstock so that it slides into the sleeves easily. Right now I have them printed out on actual cards or paper, I mean. So it allows you to easily slip them in. Like these are the boon cards. They're in this stack of like paper here. Like I said, I think there's 10. You'd probably want 10 of each boon. You'll probably be safe for that. Maybe print 20 of each boon. I can't imagine you're gonna have that many boons, depending on how many people I guess are playing. But yeah. So there's a list of all of these boons to be printed out. And there's all the commons, all the uncommons, and this will be available. Like I said, you'll be able to go to this document in the description to check these out. All the rares here. There's the 3 mythics, which look fantastic. Like AI generated art is massive. Like there's a lot here. I mean, this is Rona, and this is hold on, let me get to yeah, here we go. So these are you got Sheoldred, Erte, and Rona, and like they nailed the descriptor perfectly. Like it took a couple different ways. When I first put in Rona Sheoldred, they didn't know that she was African American, so I had to make sure that they knew that she was African American. Once I added in that detail, I think it better represents Rona. Rona is African American. She needs to be African American, not white. So Sheoldred, this is demonic entity. At first, it was like this really weird, like spider, like thing. Not quite what Sheoldred is, because Sheoldred can actually separate herself from her big like body thing, so she can actually be humanoid. So this is kind of her humanoid form. And then Erte resurrected. I couldn't for whatever the AI would not give him 4 arms. And Erte has, I guess, 4 arms. He either has 4 arms, or the card art is depicting him like moving so fast he looks like he has 4 arms, and he's just like doing multiple things at once, kind of like a, I don't know, like an after shadow or an after arm. But it looks like he has 4 arms. So I kept trying to tell the AI to like draw me this with 4 arms, and it would not do it at all. It just doesn't understand 4 arms. I tried 4 hands. It just wouldn't do it. I tried 4 separate arms. No matter what descriptor I gave it, it would not give him 4 arms. So, I don't know. I tried. But regardless, he's a sorcerer-looking guy. This text is a bit hard to read, and it even is hard to read when you're trying to read the card as well. It's legible, but I could see it being difficult. So I'll try to maybe edit that in Photoshop, because there's only so much. There's only so much you can do on the Conjurer site. So I'll have to edit this later on. And then, of course, like I said, you'll need a lot of tokens. So what I've done is the last 3 pages are just tokens that you can print out. These are the Blight tokens. These are the ones that you slip in front of each card. And these are kind of like the emblems for the Blights that you take care of. That, whenever you blight your deck, this slips in front of it. And, yeah, when looking on here, it doesn't look too hard to read, but like I said, as you can tell, there's a lot of text on there, and maybe removing the flavor text, which kind of sucks. Maybe putting the flavor text on the boss, I mean, even that would kind of cloud it as well. Flavor text is cool. I don't know, I kind of wanted to have it on there. I have flavor text for each one. But anyways, this is already looking at 45 minutes almost. But I feel like this is, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got to the end. Hopefully you are excited for the format. Like I said, I really want this format to be, even Commander Raids itself. It's not, I don't even say what it's done, but I think the Commander Raids is in a very good spot. We probably have one more version, or one more revision for the version of 0.3 before it becomes 1. And then I think we're pretty happy with the baseline version. Even the hard difficulty is more difficult than it was but still not unbeatable, and I think that's perfect. If we ever wanted to, we can make a brutal mode where it like rolls every turn, and like the results are just nutty. But that's for like CEDH level decks, and not many people really care too much about that, so priority's a little low. So, hope you guys liked it. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, share this with your friends. This document will be changing as I edit and add to it. Right now, it doesn't really explain how to play. I've went over how to play here. I will add in the like steps to play, because there is the boon phase that I don't really talk about. I kind of glaze over it a little bit, I think, in the boons section. I don't even think I do that. Yeah, where you pick from 3 boons. But yeah, so I'll add that in as it goes. But I wanted to get this out there because I'm kind of impatient, you know. I want people's feedback as well. Does this sound like something that you do? Does this sound fun? I can tell you playing it is really fun, and it's definitely something that I've actually played. You could play solo. One of my group that we meet up on Thursdays, they're like, are you doing anything Wednesday? Because we'd like to play this on Wednesday, because we're playing Frosthaven on Thursday. We don't want to like cut in too much of the time of Frosthaven, because if you've ever played Frosthaven, it takes like an hour and a half to 2 hours per scenario, and there's 130 scenarios. So we kind of want to, like, as fun as Frosthaven is, I miss playing Commander a little bit. So we might switch over to Wednesdays being Commander raids, Gauntlet Mode, and maybe a little bit of normal Commander as well, and some Commander raid. So it's fun. Give it a shot. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, thumbs up to you. It's a really long video, but I think that it's worth it. The format is fun. Probably the most fun that I've ever had playing in a game that I've created. So, hope you guys have as much fun as I did, and we'll see you next time.